Good morning. I hope my Danish pronunciation's okay. I considered saying some of my remarks this morning in Danish, and then I looked at how to pronounce "how are you doing." I'm going to stick with good morning, if that's okay. It's a huge honor to be with you here today, specifically on World Diabetes Day. I love Copenhagen. I love Denmark. I had the opportunity to be here with you all in May, and right before my flight, I had a couple hours to kind of visit the city and do some touring. And so I kind of ran through some of the highlights of Copenhagen and just fell in love right away. I mean, I love the European architecture, yet the city's got a very modern feel to it that I can really appreciate. And of course, the people here are just fantastic. And so when I came back here now, I was really looking forward to getting some touring in. And so I did a couple days ago. I had the chance to kind of run through the city again and see some of the sights. So I went and saw the Rosenborg Castle. The park there is one of my favorite sites to see. And then, of course, I had to go to Nyhavn and see that classic site there. And I also got the chance to see the Kronborg Castle up north. You have to realize I'm from Lincoln, Nebraska in the United States, and that's like a farming community right in the center of the U.S. It's not every day I get to see a castle, so it was pretty cool to be able to go out there and see some medieval castle. I could almost picture the knights walking there. It was really fun, but like I said, it's a huge honor, and I'm really thankful for the chance to be here with you today, specifically on World Diabetes Day, which is a very important holiday for me, a person with type 1 diabetes, but also for Novo Nordisk and the entire world. So as I was kind of preparing some of my remarks this morning, I wanted to learn a little bit more about what World Diabetes Day was all about. So I kind of did some research to learn a little bit more and came up with some interesting facts. So World Diabetes Day was introduced by the International Diabetes Federation and the World Health Organization in 1991. So even back then, they were beginning to realize the need to really bring the issue of diabetes to the forefront, to bring it to the global community, to raise awareness. And then in December 20th of 2006, I believe, the UN ratified a decision to make World Diabetes Day an official day. So now it was a holiday, or so to speak, of where everybody recognized the fact that diabetes was something that we needed to take into consideration as it reached a pandemic level. And I read also more about how Novo Nordisk played a very integral role in bringing about World Diabetes Day from the very beginning in 2006 and then the first day in 2007. Novo Nordisk played a huge role in bringing together not only the general public, but people with diabetes, healthcare providers, people in politics, and leaders to really make some steps in changing what had become a very big issue. Well, as I kind of read a little bit more, not just the facts about World Diabetes Day, but also kind of some of the more interesting facts about diabetes itself, I started scanning the World Diabetes Atlas that the IDF produces. And these are some numbers that they wrote last year in 2013. And they're quite staggering, actually. Currently, it said that 382 million people worldwide are living with diabetes. And then it also said about 316 million people in the world also have glucose intolerance, which puts them at very high risk for diabetes as well. And about 175 million of those cases are undiagnosed. So there's quite a few people out there that don't know or are in countries that aren't able to diagnose properly people with diabetes. One figure that really caught me off guard was the fact that 80% of the people with diabetes in the world live in low to middle income countries. So this isn't something, only affecting major countries like my country, the United States, or even here in Denmark. This is an issue affecting all the countries around the world that has become a very big issue. And then more than that, they said at the end of 2013, diabetes would cost around $548 billion in healthcare costs. And diabetes was also the result of 5.1 million deaths. And then also, it said in less than 25 years, the number of cases of diabetes would rise to 592 million. Those are big numbers. Those are very staggering numbers. But if you're like me, sometimes those numbers can just kind of blow past you. You read them, you take them in, but you don't really think about them. But for me, they've begun to take on a little bit more personal impact because I've experienced them. I've started to put faces to those numbers. This past year in 2013, I had the opportunity to travel to South Africa and compete in a relay that was raising awareness for diabetes down there. And it was a cycling relay that started in Johannesburg. And on that first leg of the journey, we rode through the Soweto, which is, I believe, one of the poorest urban areas in the world. And I wasn't prepared for the level of poverty that I saw there. I mean, people living on trash heaps, houses made out of metal that were just pushed together. And then to actually meet people living with diabetes in that area, it just broke my heart to realize that these people were trying to survive in such tough conditions. A little bit later that month, I had the chance to compete in the Tour of Rwanda. So we went to Rwanda a few weeks early so we could meet with some healthcare providers that work with people with diabetes. I got the chance to meet a couple of kids that were living with diabetes there. I met a young girl that had unfortunately been affected pretty severely by the disease and was an amputee. But yet, as she told me her story, she still had to walk daily, miles, to get water, clean water for her family just to survive. I met a little boy there in Rwanda who also had diabetes and heard his story. This boy had been abandoned by his family, literally just left on the side of the road to fend for himself. His family didn't understand the disease. They didn't have the means to care for him, and therefore he was just left alone. And I got to meet that little boy, and I looked in his eyes, and I shook his hand. And, it just broke my heart to see him living in that situation. But when I looked in his eyes, there was something different, something lacking. He didn't have any hope. And that's what I want to talk with you guys a little bit about today, is just the power of hope, how powerful it really is. There's a quote by Emma Brunner that I'd like to share. It says, "What oxygen is to the lungs, such is hope to the meaning of life." This little boy didn't have any hope. But what I want to share with you today is my story. I want to tell you how Team Novo Nordisk impacted my life after I was diagnosed with diabetes. But more than that, I want to share with you just how powerful the message of Novo Nordisk changing diabetes is, because it's spreading hope. I've seen the impact in my own life with that very simple message. I believe the message of changing diabetes is providing the best antidote we have against diabetes today, and that's providing hope. So let me tell you a little bit about myself. So I'm from Lincoln, Nebraska, as I said, which is a very small farming community right in the smack dab in the middle of the U.S. So whenever I see the ocean, I get excited because I can count on my hand the number of times I've seen it. But from a young age, I had a lot of core values kind of instilled in my life, and one of those was hard work. I grew up with a big family. I have 6 siblings, so I was always the instigator of as many fights as possible with my younger brothers. But I loved growing up with them. We used to play outside all the time. It was always some type of sport. It was football, baseball, basketball, whatever we could think of. We had a lot of animals too growing up, so there was always chores to be done. But from a young age, my grandfather was in the United States Air Force, and he used to tell me all the time the stories from his experience. And so it really made a big impact on me and really inspired me. So when I was about 6 or 7, I decided that's what I was going to do. I was going to go and serve my country in the U.S. military and the United States Air Force. I wanted to fly fighter jets. Well, every kid has that dream, right? It's like, I want to be a fighter. I want to be a fighter jet pilot. But it was different for me. Like, the way I'm wired is when I find something I want to do, I do it. And it became a bit of an obsession for me. I started doing everything that I could to achieve my goal. And one of those goals was to be in the United States Air Force Academy, where I could graduate with a higher chance of flying fighter jets. And so when I was about 9 years old, I started sending letters to the Air Force Academy telling them that at some point I was going to come to their school. I started doing everything I could. I started planning out my academic career all the way through high school so that I could have everything laid out so I had the best chance to succeed at the Air Force Academy. I started participating in sports, any type of organization that I could, anything that would look good on a resume so that I could achieve my dream. I started putting posters and reminders all over my wall. I had posters of fighter jets. I had posters of the Air Force Academy. And if anybody dare ask me what I was going to do with my life, I would tell them straight away I was going to the Air Force. And it was my dream, it was my life goal from a very young age. That's all I knew, and that was the direction I was heading. And there was nothing that was going to stop me. But sometimes life throws you curveballs that you aren't expecting. In 2005, in the spring, my youngest sister, Sarah, was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. It came as a huge shock to my family because we had never had diabetes in our family. We didn't even really know what it was. It was somewhat overwhelming to realize that, now my little sister had diabetes. And then to add insult to injury, that Christmas in 2005, my younger brother was also diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. You want to talk about overwhelming. It's one thing to have one sibling, one child have diabetes. It's quite another to have 2 and be diagnosed in the matter of 1 year. And then January of 2006, I started noticing symptoms. I started, using the restroom frequently. I started losing weight, even though I was crazy hungry all the time. I didn't believe it. There's no way possible that I could have diabetes. To prove it to myself, I decided, I'm going to check my blood sugar. When I checked my blood sugar and the number 300 popped up, I thought for sure it was a fluke. There's no way. I had sugar on my finger, the meter was wrong, and I just forgot about it. And for 3 months, those symptoms didn't go away. They continued to get worse and worse and worse, and I tried to hide it. I tried to deny it because I knew the implications, how it would affect my dream if I had type 1 diabetes. But my mom's a nurse. She's pretty smart, and she began to pick up on those symptoms. And I'll never forget, it was March of 2006, one evening, and my dad, He, as casually as he could, came up to me and said, "Ben, can we check your blood sugar?" At that moment, I knew it was over. I knew what was coming. And when he checked it and the number read high, which meant my sugar was over 500, I knew that my worst fears had just become a reality and that I had type 1 diabetes. It was tough. It was really, really hard in that moment specifically. I've never felt so hopeless, so helpless, because everything that I'd known, my whole life's direction, had now just been crushed. I remember having tears just running down my face as I looked at my mom and I said, "What about the academy?" Because I knew my dream was gone. I remember I didn't sleep for weeks because, as a young kid, having the very thing that was your foundation, was your rock, be taken away from you was very tough. I think the hardest part for me, though, was having to go into my room and take down all those reminders, those posters that I had on my wall. What once was going to be my reality had now become a memory that I was trying to forget, and I shoved them into the back of my closet. Diabetes now seemed to define me. That's who I was. I said to myself over and over again, just trying not to believe it, Ben Dilley, type 1 diabetic. I could not believe it. I resented it. I was so ashamed of the fact that I had diabetes. I told no one. I remember I would check my blood sugar in the bathroom. I would take my shots there as well. My best friend didn't even know for over a year. I didn't want anybody to know. I didn't want to be different. I wanted to still be me. But it seemed like the disease defined me now, and I hated every bit of it. One thing I resented the most was going to the doctor's office, because it seemed like it was just one more reminder of who I was now. And now I was defined by this disease. But one particular appointment with the doctor, I heard about a professional cyclist named Phil Sutherland. He had a team of athletes, and they were competing in the race across America. But there was something different about this team. They all had type 1 diabetes. And, they weren't just, I thought, well, maybe they're just racing, to raise awareness or something. But no, this team was racing to win. And they were competing against some of the best in the world. And that year, I watched them race from one point of the United States to the other, beat every other professional team, and break the world record. I couldn't believe it. Here was a group of athletes with type 1 diabetes that wasn't being defined by the disease. In fact, they were beating it. They were showing what was possible, what they could achieve in spite of the disease. That was the turning point for me. In that moment, everything changed. My perspective did a complete 180 turn. I realized that I didn't have to be defined by the disease anymore. It didn't have to be who I was. If I had a dream, if I had a goal, I could achieve it with proper management and proper control in spite of the disease. I'd always loved cycling. And when I saw Phil and what he was doing, I knew I wanted to take my cycling to the next level. I wanted to be a professional cyclist like Phil. I wanted to inspire people just like he had inspired me. And in that moment, everything was different. Everything was changed. I had a direction now. I finally had a goal. I finally had a dream, something that I could pursue. But more than that, I finally had hope. I finally had a direction. And so, as I said, I'm a very driven, focused person, and immediately I bought my first road bike and I started training. I sent an email to Phil and I told him I wanted to be a professional cyclist. Well, he told me, I've just started from ground zero, so it's going to take a little bit of work. It's going to take a little bit of time. So he told me to set an intermediate goal of racing with the team's development team. So that's what I was going to pursue. And from there, I started working as hard as I could, training as much as I could. I began racing at the collegiate level, and then I started racing in amateur races around my home in Nebraska. Phil sent me a jersey, and every time I put that thing on, I felt like I could fly. It was so fun to be able to represent the team with the team's jersey. I'll never forget my first win at a major race and being able to cross that finish line and have the announcer call my name. It's an addicting feeling. It was great. It's probably one of the best moments ever, knowing that I had achieved something in spite of my disease. And so from then on, I continued to work as hard as I could, training and racing. I tend to crash a lot. I'm very aggressive, sometimes too aggressive, and I've been on the ground more than I'd like to. But with every crash, with every mistake, I knew I was getting better. I knew I was learning, I was progressing, I was getting towards my goal. I never lost sight of my goal. In 2012, in the fall, I finally received an email from the team with a contract offer to race for the Team Novo Nordisk development team. I was so excited. I remember I called my best friend and literally was jumping around the room. This was a huge moment for me because it was a huge step towards my end goal, my dream of being a professional one day. And I'd finally achieved a major milestone. But it was a big change for me. I moved from my home in Lincoln, Nebraska to Alpharetta, Georgia, and where we lived and trained together with my teammates. We spent the entire year training and racing. We traveled all over the U.S., competed in some of the biggest races. I had the opportunity to travel to Russia, I competed in the 5 Rings of Moscow there, and then I also had the chance to travel to Africa and compete in the Tour of Rwanda. So it was a huge, huge learning experience, an incredible year as I continued to grow and develop as a cyclist. About September of 2013, I received an email from Phil with an invitation for a meeting in his office. It's always a bit nerve-wracking when you get an email from your boss inviting you to have a meeting with him. So I wasn't sure what to expect. I really had no clue. And he invited me into his office, sat me down, and when he told me that the team wanted to offer me a professional contract for the 2014 season, I couldn't believe my ears. I couldn't believe what he was saying. And as he sat there and he explained the details of the contract, all I could think about as I sat there was 2006, March, crying because my dream, my original goal had been crushed. And here I was, 8 years later, sitting in a chair having somebody tell me that my dream was just going to become a reality. It was unbelievable. So now here I am. I've completed my first year as a professional, and it's been incredibly awesome, and it's been incredibly hard. When you reach that professional level, it's definitely a dream come true, but the cyclists are very, very good. You're competing against the best in the world, but I love it. I love every single minute of it. And it gives me the chance to improve, to grow as a cyclist. And this year I've learned so much, and I've developed a lot as a rider, and I'm so excited for the 2015 season. We just wrapped up our 2014 camp, and we're getting ready for the next season. I couldn't be more excited for the race program that we have, the direction we're heading as a team, and my teammates, my directors and staff, I'm just super excited for what's to come in 2015. And the Team Novo Nordisk is, it's so much more than just, a cycling team. We have some big goals. One of our major goals is to be in the Tour de France in 2021. 2021 is a very important date, as I'm sure you're aware, as it's the 100th anniversary of insulin, which is the life-giving drug we depend upon. And it's going to take a lot of hard work. It's a huge goal to be able to compete at the biggest sporting event in cycling in the world. Not a small task, but we're all committed. I know I'm going to do whatever I can, and it's my goal to be a part of sending the first all-diabetes professional cycling team to the Tour de France. We're all committed. We're not going to quit. Every single one of us on that team is 100% behind achieving that goal. But as I said, the team isn't just about winning bike races. The team isn't just about the Tour de France. Team Novo Nordisk has 3 major missions to inspire, educate, and empower people with diabetes. And so when we line up to race, it's not just us 18 riders. We represent the entire world, all the people with diabetes in the world. And the team also has a triathlon team, a running team, and a mountain bike team. So we really represent and encompass people with diabetes competing in their respective sports. So it's so much more than just us lining up to race. But for me personally, this team means so much more. Sure, when I line up to race my bike, I want to win. It's no denying it. I want to be the first one to cross that finish line. And I hope to be be a part of that team that gets to the Tour de France in 2021. But for me, this team, it means so much more to me. This team changed my life. It gave me hope. It gave me future. It gave me a new direction. This team really changed my whole perspective and my whole world. I was sharing with you that story of that boy in Rwanda. So we went to the Tour of Rwanda a couple weeks early to visit with some healthcare providers and meet some people with diabetes there. They took us to a diabetes clinic that was kind of out in the bush, out in Rwanda, and it took us a couple hours to get out there. But when we got there, we're talking extremely primitive. And what this diabetes clinic did was it brought in these kids that didn't have a place to go really because they had diabetes. And it tried to teach them how to manage their diabetes, as well as it taught them a trade or a skill so that they'd be able to, once they left the clinic, be able to somehow provide for themselves so that they can still manage their diabetes. Well, that's where I met this little boy. And, one of our missions as the team being there was to give glucose meters to these kids. And a glucose meter is something I use all the time. Unfortunately, I seem to misplace them quite frequently. But to this little boy, that glucose meter meant everything. And I had the chance to give him one. And the look on his face and his eyes, it was just incredible. Because now he had a device that he could use. Now he had a way of checking his blood sugar. Now he was able to manage his diabetes. He was able to dream about something other than the life expectancy of people with diabetes in Rwanda, which is 20. Most people don't live to be past 20 in Rwanda. But now he had a chance to dream. Now he had a chance to hope. And that's what I saw in his eyes. See, every day I have the chance to train and to race my bike in pursuit of my goals and my dreams, and hopefully be in the Tour de France in 2021. But more than that, I have the ability to help spread a message of hope, the message of changing diabetes every time I zip up my jersey. You know, a few weeks before I came here, I had the opportunity to speak to an elementary school in Colorado. And so I had a bunch of kids, about 60 kids that were going to come hear me talk. And so, you know, I had heard that there was 2 boys in the class that had type 1 diabetes, but due to privacy rules and regulations, they weren't allowed to tell me who they were. So as you know, when I got there, all 60 kids were sitting in front of me, and I introduced myself. I had my team jersey on. I said, "My name's Ben Dilley. I'm a professional cyclist for Team Novo Nordisk, and I have type 1 diabetes." And almost immediately, I saw two faces light up in the group. And in front of all 60 classmates, almost simultaneously, they both said, "I have diabetes too," as if diabetes didn't matter at all. See, you know, I'm so thankful for the chance to be a part of this bigger Novo Nordisk team that is spreading the changing diabetes message and truly providing hope. You know, and I've seen it in my own life. I've seen it in the eyes of that boy in Rwanda. And it's a message of hope that can and will truly change the world. What an incredible opportunity I have. What an incredible opportunity we have as Team Novo Nordisk to spread hope and to truly change diabetes. Thank you so much. It's truly been an honor and a great pleasure to be here with you all.